Hi everyone, to just anyone who's just joining, and welcome. I'm Kani Talabani, the community editor at Hot Topics, and I'll be moderating today's TechGirl C-Suite Exchange in partnership with Avanade. Now, our conversation today is one that feels not only timely, but essential. And it's a topic that touches on the core of what leadership needs to be and needs to evolve into. Now, this is a TechGirl C-Suite Exchange. So for those of you who are new to TechGirl, it's a purpose-led initiative started by Hot Topics to empower girls aged 16 and up to explore careers in STEM, through our interactive masterclasses, workshops, and guidance from our TechGirl mentors. And as we all know, the way we work is changing. We have hybrid environments, the rise of generative AI, and increasingly diverse multi-generational workforces are all challenging traditional models of leadership. But within that disruption lies a huge opportunity to lead differently, lead better, and ensure that we're preparing the next generation of talent to do the same thing. So hello again to people who are just joining. The speakers today are Nina Tatzi, CIO at Brambles, Joanna Drake, CTO at the Hut Group. And first up, helping us to set the stage for today's conversation is Catherine Paffett, Director and Head of Data and AI Client Solutions at Avanade. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Avanade, they are an organization at the forefront of delivering AI, data, and analytics, helping their clients drive innovation and staying competitive. Again, a little side note here for the people who've just joined and the live audience watching. If there's something you'd like to ask any of our speakers, please do pop your questions into the chat box. As I said earlier, it's a fun little element we're trying today. That's where you all react to your favorite questions in the chat. And the ones that get the most hearts, likes, smiley faces will be read out promptly. Now, Catherine, I think we can start. My first question for you is, how do you define being a steward of tomorrow's talents in today's environment of rapid change?
That's a fantastic question. Thanks for asking, Kani. I think for me, I always think you get the best results if you have a diverse team. And I look at us right now in the era of AI, and I get very excited because I think AI really levels the playing field. So I think the technology really has that ability to include, and I can think of fantastic examples, which I can also allude to later on, how it's really, I think, leveled the playing field for all kinds of people, but it also, most importantly, has the ability to exclude. So really at Avanade, when we are developing any application with AI, we're not just thinking who is in the room, we're thinking much more importantly, who is not in the room. And when I go back to that point about diverse teams, we need a diverse team when we're designing these applications just to make sure that they are very, very inclusive. And I'm always thinking, first of all, I'm thinking, how can I empower my teams to really come to work and do the best job possible? How can I empower them to give their best performance at work? So that means thinking a lot about inclusive design. And then secondly, I think a lot about how can I make sure that everyone has a voice. So I'll give you an example of inclusive design. So Microsoft GitHub Copilot, for instance. So for developers that could have ADHD, for instance, they have certain features where notifications can be switched off, so that they can really get in the zone. There's no distractions, and that's a great example of inclusive design. For instance, in terms of inclusive office space, I worked at a number of companies, and Microsoft, for instance, we had fantastic booths. So if you were particularly sensitive, if you could have a kind of sensory overload, for instance, which a lot of us get if there's a lot happening, if there's a lot of calls happening, a lot of people walking past. Microsoft actually had booths where you were in there with your monitor and you could really just get in the zone and concentrate. I worked for EY for a number of years, and we actually had a no call zone in the office. So we had different zones, and there was one zone where it was very, very much inclusive in terms of just having a quiet space, and we had other zones where you could be more collaborative. So I think in terms of inclusive design at the office, I'm always thinking of how can I enable our teams, our diverse teams, to actually perform at their best. And British Airways actually put it very, very well. They released a video for Diversity Disability Pride Week, and there was a quote there from Steve Mason, who works at British Airways, and he said what Disability Pride Month means to him is everyone achieving their best potential, no matter what their limitations are. And that's my aim. That's really my aim with our teams. Second point is around giving everyone a voice. I remember years ago I had a meeting and we'd all agreed on the agenda. It was a pitch. We'd all agreed on the agenda. We had the best people for each topic and we were going into that pitch. And we just thought we had the most fantastic lineup. And we got into the pitch and we didn't really keep to the agenda. There were quite a lot of things that happened and we had to be agile and pivot. But what really stuck with me is that a lot of the brightest minds in the room that we'd really been, expecting to really, win the business partner over, they stayed quiet, and that experience really stayed with me. And I make a real effort in everything I do just to think, how can I make sure that everyone has a voice here? So that means positioning the right people at the right time. So if I know I'm going to be talking to, say, a client or a business partner, it means actually positioning the best person, but encouraging them to talk. So saying, well, we've got so and so here, he's fantastic, he's really driven with value with this technology at this client, he's delivered these results, what do you think? That means positioning colleagues with the right people. And also if you're in scenarios like that, also just finding subtle ways to actually get people to talk, whether that's pinging them per Teams and saying, hey, you're going to ask your question, or whether it's actually calling them out and saying, hey, what do you think about this topic? So I think that's really top of mind for me with my teams.
And Nina, Joe, how are you empowering your teams? How are you being stewards and leaders of tomorrow's talents?
So I think difficult to add to Catherine's kind of like such a elaborate kind of summary. I think I would add that I'm trying to encourage more in the remote working, one-to-one connections. It's very important to maintain that networking, social connections, and it is very difficult, especially for the new joiners, for the people who are coming with a bit less experience, to understand how critical it is. So I'm encouraging that with kind of younger, less experienced people, like just to explain to them that this like coffee chats, water coolers chats, are super important. They have to gain that network, and don't forget that is also part of life. And also I'm putting a lot of efforts on trying to build that also one-to-one myself with the team, to understand each of the team member I have, like how they feel, how they're able to open up and participate in the team conversations, not assume that we're all the same, but actually trying to find the ways to make them join into, maybe pair them up in some of the joint projects. Not everybody is able to speak, especially in the remote setting. It's super difficult. I know that myself. And the last point is to share my own vulnerability. So it's like to run kind of those sessions, more talking and sharing how I feel, like the imposter syndrome I experience myself, and just let them bring themselves to those conversations, just to be opening up by leading the way, by showing that it's actually relevant to all of us, so that they don't assume that they're on their own struggling with those kind of problems, challenges. So those I can add. Jo?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, everything that Catherine and Nina just said. So I think on top of that, for me, it's about that inclusive culture and creating that psychologically safe environment, regardless of who you are, where you're from, what stage you're at in your career. And I think with regards to sort of tomorrow's talent, it's really about cultivating leaders who are going to shape technology long after I've gone. So really building a legacy around leadership for the future. And I think everyone knows technologies are really, really fast paced. Industry, it's not getting slower at all. So we need to have an environment that doesn't just survive rapid change, but actually thrives on it and thrives because of it. So I think I'm always trying to sort of create learning, particularly around the culture. So building teams that see change as opportunities and not threats, so thrive from that rapid change. The key one for me is around failure as learning rather than failure as punishment, and making sure all that fail fast stuff, we know all about that, but making sure we learn from it as well, and that people aren't punished. That's a big part of psychological safety within our teams. Investing in learning and making sure the budgets and the time that is there for the learning. But a big thing for me around tomorrow's talent as well has been about what I call reverse mentoring. So I feel I'm getting to a stage within my career where I've had a lot of mentors and I've done a lot of mentoring, but I'm finding the shift of the mentoring I need is actually coming from the newest, brightest talent within my tech team. So I'm actually being mentored by very junior developers in my teams where I'm really learning about emerging technologies and new techniques, particularly in the world of AI. And a lot of people will know I do a podcast every week around AI, but within that podcast, the guests that come on are not just from all different backgrounds, they're also from different types of teams. So not leaving the non-tech teams behind, making sure I've got a facilities AI champion on the podcast talking about how they're able to service the toilets better using AI, and making sure that we're including all facets of technology across all of the industry and across all roles.
Now, Nina, Catherine, I could see you nodding there when Joe mentioned that reverse mentoring aspect. Do you want to add anything to that?
That's definitely part. Although I'm offering mentoring myself, I actually always opening statement that it's a reverse mentoring for me as well. And we could not know it all. It's obvious. So learning from each other, and especially from, I don't want to be ageist, but from the younger generation, more advanced a bit in the AI, I'm constantly learning there, and it's so exciting.
I also concur with that. I mean, we're not, our generation isn't AI native, so I love getting any reverse mentoring I can from my friends' kids, for instance, because they grew up with a smartphone and they're interfacing and acting with this technology, and I would say quite often a much more native way than I am. I'm still working with AI every single day, but the way they work with it, the way they put AI to work for them is different. And I want to learn from that. So I thought that was a fantastic point.
Well, I mean, the three of you touched on what I'm about to ask now, but, what kind of major shifts have you seen in how leadership needs to evolve due to hybrid work and AI acceleration and generational diversity?
I think I met just a brilliant woman a while ago called Amy Walters Cohen, and she published a book around 5 paradoxical mindsets that she thinks that leaders need to have in today's business landscape, in a landscape of platform shifts that we've seen over the last couple of years, and also in that kind of backdrop of mega trends. So I mean, we can all probably say right now, I mean, Satya says that Microsoft's AI models, their progression doubles every 6 months, so they get at least double as better every 6 months, let's say. So if you look at something like Moore's law, that's really Moore's law and steroids. We're seeing a rate of technological progression that we've never seen. And Amy came up with 5 paradoxical mindsets that leaders should have. And I have to say, day to day, I can really relate to that. So she said leaders should be ruthlessly caring, for instance. They should be ambitiously appreciative. They should be politically virtuous. They should be confidently humble, and they should be responsibly daring. And I think that really resonated with me, me because I see those paradoxes every day. So for instance, being confidently humble, for instance, I have a strategy to land. I have sales targets to land, but I'm working every single day. I'm in a very privileged position. I'm working every single day with people who are a lot smarter than me, and a technology landscape that I said that is really equates to kind of Moore's law and steroids with the rate of progress there. So I need to be confident, but I also need to be very, very open to being proved wrong. I'd say, being open to pivoting on the strategy, and be humble, because I'm sure I'm going to get proved wrong, probably 5 times a week at least, because everything's changing. So I think as a leader now, you do have to embrace those paradoxes, because they're only going to increase when we look at that technological progression that we're dealing with right now, and when we look at all of the mega trends that we're experiencing globally right now, from geopolitical risk to aging workforces, communities. It's only going to get more.
Okay, paradoxical lessons. Nina, Joe, thoughts on this?
Need to get that book instantly. Shall we go to purchase that after this? I agree with a lot of those points, Catherine. I think I love the responsibly daring thing. I've grabbed that. I love the sound of that. I think the being present thing has been a really interesting one, because I think, so I've spent most of my career working with hybrid teams and working with global teams where you're never in the same room. And we've been going through an interesting move where we've been having people return to the office for the majority of the week in our different hubs sort of globally around the world. And it's been really interesting because Catherine, you were talking earlier about those spaces, those working spaces where people could feel comfortable depending on what type of environment they're happy being in. And we've got a lot of that here, and just people being back together and having those bumping into each other in the coffee queue and at the water machine, and going for a walk at lunchtime. The difference has been invaluable in that personal connection. And I think that using your emotional intelligence, getting to know your team. I was on a TechGirl panel a couple of weeks ago in Sardinia, which some of the people on watching the panel, which would have been at, and Esther on there was talking about the importance of getting to know your team, getting to know your players, and understanding their strengths and weaknesses, no matter where they are, and playing people in a position of strength. Really important, being present and understanding all the people within your team. And if you're not all together, you have to sort of create those collision opportunities virtually as well, to make sure that people are feeling included, no matter where they're based.
Sorry, go on.
One quick point for me. We're also, I think a lot of companies are thinking about return to office right now, and they're also thinking, how do I, if it's not mandatory and it's optional, how do they encourage people to come to work? And one thing I thought we did fantastically at Microsoft, when I worked for Microsoft Germany, we had a kind of, I don't quite know how to, it was like a lunch raffle. So it was one of our data team, they built up a tool that would just give you a random lunch partner. So you could be an intern and you had lunch with an account executive. You could be the CEO, you had lunch with one of the junior sales team, but it gave you a random lunch partner, and everyone needs to have lunch. So it was very inclusive in the fact that it wasn't after work where some people can't attend. It didn't involve alcohol. So for instance, some people don't drink. It was very inclusive. Everyone has to have lunch. So you've got a surprise lunch partner. And I thought that was a fantastic strategy, just to encourage people to get back to the office if they could, for instance. And you can do it virtually as well. So it works both ways.
Nina, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I think I was listening to this. I think what I focusing on as well, it's a lot of interesting kind of paradoxes, Catherine, you mentioned. But I think for me, one of the paradoxes, which I think was part of those 5, is like how you bring more accountability and decision making, because it's the remoteness and a lot of these conversations that are driving some probably potential for avoiding taking the decisions and accountability. And I see that as a problem where we as a leaders has to demonstrate like how to make sure the decision making accountability goes into the team, and that they learn also how to enhance that. So considering humbly, emotionally, everything, but actually come to the decision, drive the business forward. That's the challenge and the paradox I'm observing as well. So it's becoming more difficult to get to the point, to the decision. And that's what I'm trying to address as well in the teams.
So I'm going to try and open up gradually the questions from the audience. We've had a statement from Jevon Partridge. He's given us a lovely little acronym, FAIL, First Attempt in Learning. And I actually had a question of my own based off the back of that. You know, you've already kind of outlined these, but, you know, what are some practical ways you can create environments that encourage that, you know, experimentation and failure within your teams?
Talk about your mistakes very openly. I mean, I almost love it when we start something and we hit an issue or we get something wrong and we can just stop and share. There's very much sharing. I will stand up regularly and say, you know, I made a decision. It was the wrong decision. That's fine. This is how we're going to go about making the new decision, or this is what we learn through getting this wrong. And I think showing that you're yourself in your most vulnerable moments, and that being absolutely okay. And even showing that, you know, even though I do that, sometimes it's quite uncomfortable, and I'm a human and we're all humans, and that's absolutely fine. I think makes people feel that they can do the same. And it's really important to do the same. And I've inherited teams over the years where failure has resulted in punishment, and it can take such a long time to get them out of that almost being scared to share those failures and learn from them. So it's really impactful.
Absolutely.
I would say that, of course, it's very important to recognize, like Joe has said, and allow for that kind of decision to be taken quickly. And for me, switching from this very traditional way of the project run forever, and it has to achieve the goal even if it failed a long time ago. It's that kind of more like what we now say agile sprint approach, when you review the decisions with the team on the quarterly basis, you're allowed to change the direction. So you build it into the flow. So that becomes failure is possible, but you don't say it's a failure. You just change the direction of travel. So that becomes a norm. So you failed and you change. So it becomes part of the project life cycle. So it's normal.
I always thought Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, I used to take a lot of inspiration from his mindset, particularly on this topic, and also to encourage teams. And he always used to say, if you're not embarrassed about the first version of your product, you've launched too late. And I think we can take so much of that. You know, we can't sit on a product for months now. We have to expose it to that end user feedback. Get that end user feedback, then as you say, Nina, make it better. But we can't sit on products for months or even years now. How we did years ago now. So I always think he has a fantastic mindset there.
Lovely. Well, I've got a question from Monica Perez. She's asking, how do you reconcile the importance of inclusion, equality and diversity in these challenging times of a perceived or real pushback against them in different sectors? If that was a mouthful, it is in the chat for you to go refer back to. But I'm going to open this up to anyone on the panel to answer.
I would, I'll let Nina and Joe give their thoughts, because I think I've given my thoughts there at the beginning, that when you're designing any application that involves AI and any applications in general, you need to think who is in the room, but more importantly, you need to think who is not in the room. You need to make sure that your data's clean, there's no bias in it. You need to make sure that you've really taken everyone into account, and that's paramount, that you need to be responsible in everything you do. I can think of one company years ago, they built a solution that incorporated AI to unlock car doors, for instance, but there was only a certain demographic who was involved in building that solution. So at the end of the day, if I'd tried to open that car door with my red fingernails, I would not have been able to open that car door. And there are a number of other demographics who also couldn't open that car, for instance. So you've just got to include everyone in that design process. And you've also got to make sure that you design your workspace and your working areas and your offices inclusively so that everyone is included and everyone can bring their best to work.
Absolutely.
I think as well, so I was just finding Monica's question in the chat, because I think what Monica's getting out here is that I think we all know, and we all talk about the importance of inclusion, equality and diversity, but we do seem to feel we're in a time where there seems to be more pushback on this than I think we've probably had in the last few years. And it almost feels like just as we were getting there seems to be a bit of a change in community generally that's almost starting to push back on some of those beliefs, which is really interesting. I think for me, the results speak for themselves. And there's just stats galore about how inclusive teams are more successful in inclusive businesses. I will just constantly reference people looking at the results that the inclusive teams actually deliver, and I know that they're more successful, and I know they deliver the right outcomes more quickly. So yeah, I will always point at the results because the results speak for themselves, and we just have to hope that the naysayers realise as time goes on that the results do speak for themselves, and let's just carry on.
And continuing on that, I do feel there is a pushback. I think we all kind of realize it's in the geopolitical kind of conditions, and it's not a secret and nothing to kind of, but I continue promoting that myself and encourage others, like for the diversity conversations, to just get going, be it in the open, and use statistics and use numbers and just stick to those, because they help to move that forward initially. When there were targets, there were like direction. I think we should not let it go just assuming, because they slightly moved on those targets, let's just assume everything is done and it's perfect. We have to keep looking as leaders on what are the numbers showing us, not just emotions, not just the feeling, but actual numbers. And I think it helps. And I keep bringing that in every leadership conversation. What do we see on the diversity? What are the ratings? And always included in the conversations, in the leaders' coffee chats, in the formal, informal town halls, and also in the anonymized questionnaires. Always measure that point, how people feel. Is it continuing happening? So informal feedback and also structured data has to be always there. We should not let it go. Otherwise, it will slip very quickly, especially in the current times of the formal pushback. So let's be transparent. It happens. We need to promote it.
I do think as well, sort of over the years, there's been a lot of focus on organisations having sort of DE&I targets and strategies and publicly, publishing them. But they're not actually embedding them within the functions within the business. It's almost like we put this target out there and then there's an afterthought of, oh shit, did we actually hit any of those numbers? Are our numbers anything like that? And I think they need to actually be properly embedded within the functional leaders within an organisation, and they have to be measured against those objectives rather than it being some high-level organisational strategy that's in their outward-facing, material. It's got to be real, being lived and breathed every day.
Thank you all. And Sarah Mabasha has asked, she's stated that obviously the younger generation is very conscious of judgment and being judged. And how do you, in your mentoring sessions or when you're advising people, how do you get them out of that mindset and more focused on their progress and less on being absolutely perfect in their roles?
I think a lot of that comes from confidence as well, because I think we probably were all a bit like that and maybe didn't speak up or put ourselves forward because we were worried we were going to be judged heavily. And I think a lot of that comes with confidence, and it's trying to instill that confidence there. And I think, you talk about younger people worrying about being judged. I think you could always start to talk about generational diversity and the difference there is with all the different, I can't remember what Gen X, Gen Z, but there are lots of different generations that we're working with, especially with people working longer within our departments. But yeah, I think a lot of that comes with confidence and helping people show what they're doing maybe in other ways. They don't necessarily have to speak up. In a great big room, there are other ways in showing your results, getting feedback on those results and increasing people's confidence.
I'm laughing because I'm having this conversation with my mentee like almost on the weekly basis and trying to make them be more brave, kind of step out and stop trying to be perfect and go and explore. And I'm trying to say that just go into the unknown area, stop sticking to the area you know, and try doing something you haven't done, you don't have experience doing, and experiment. It's I noticed that as being like getting stuck in the area you feel comfortable is like getting a bit more a comfort zone for the younger generation. So I think that's encouraging, but also making them, just putting them into the assignments where they're like completely in the new, to help them take those risks. But it's a very fair comment. I observe that risk taking and trying to be perfect is becoming a bit more common.
Definitely. I think a lot of that comes from the psychological safety piece as well. And I think, in the culture within your organization, I think whether you're junior or not, there can be situations where you might be within a certain group of people. And if there's a culture where the hippo, like the highest paid opinion in the room, is the one that's making the decisions, not necessarily with the buy-in of the others, that can cause a problem where you think you're going to be judged if you speak up. So I think regardless of where you are in your career, that psychological safety and feeling like you can speak up, if you are worried about being judged, that's only going to help if you've got that type of culture there.
Absolutely.
I really concur with what both of you said there.
Well, Catherine, there is a question for you specifically from Atif Siddiqui. In your role leading strategy at Avanade and Microsoft, how do you balance short-term commercial goals with long-term commitments to sustainability and innovation? And there's a follow-up to this as well. How do you foster a culture of bold transformation while managing the risk of change fatigue among teams?
Oh, fantastic question. I think the first part, I'd actually want to reflect on it and get back to you in writing. I'd be very happy just to ping some emails. Can you just repeat the second part again?
So how do you foster a culture of bold transformation while managing the risk of change fatigue among teams?
Oh, fantastic point. I think when I was at Microsoft, Satya said we should have a learn-it-all mindset, not a know-it-all mindset. So that was one of the kind of shifts that he really encouraged. And I think if you really encourage your teams to learn and be curious and really share knowledge, they realize how much is changing and they're excited about change and they're communicating about change. So that slightly lessens the change fatigue there. I think in terms of bold ambitions, again, I think it's about really making sure that your teams have a voice, so everyone has a voice. I think then you can actually realize those ambitions. So it's about actually making sure that you're listening to what everyone has to say, which so far I think works well, because then you can actually realize broader ambitions. And what was the first part of the question? I'll just see. It was quite a long question, so I'm just
So in your role leading strategy at Avanade and Microsoft, how do you balance short-term commercial goals and long-term commitments to sustainability and innovation?
I think another point, particularly around the sustainability and the innovation, I think all of us have to think about it, that we can't build everything, we have to buy as well. So a lot of companies that we work with, for instance, they will build to a certain extent, but then they'll buy from us. So to actually realize their really big AI ambitions, for instance, that actually realize those transformational use cases, they'll buy maybe managed services from us to actually bring those applications to life. They'll buy production environments, they'll buy ML ops. They won't actually build everything. And I think in terms of really innovating, both at Microsoft and at Avanade now, I think it's important that we also buy. We don't just build everything ourselves, we partner up. So I very much believe in an ecosystem economy. So I want to extend our capabilities through partners. I don't want us to build everything. We might not be, for instance, say, there probably a lot of companies that know more about ESG than we do. So why don't we partner up with an independent software vendor that has a fantastic solution to actually, realize those ESG ambitions? I think it's very, very important in this landscape not to do everything yourself, and actually scale out your sales forces with partners and actually scale out your capabilities with partners as well. And then I think there's those bold ambitions that you're talking about in the question, can be realized 10 times over. I think we all have to think about buying a little bit more, not just building everything ourselves. Hopefully I've answered it. If I haven't, you can send me a message, because I always come up with some other ideas afterwards. So very happy to continue that conversation offline.
That's a lovely answer. Thank you, Catherine. We appreciate it. And Rachel Baker is taking the focus back to AI now. So she's asking, how is AI or offshoring affecting the availability of junior roles in your organizations? So there's a little note underneath that as well. She's concerned about how career paths have changed and how young people get foundational learning roles. Anyone can jump in here.
An interesting question, Rachel. Hello. Yeah, I think I'm guessing what Rachel's getting here is generally in technology, people would come into junior roles and then work their way up or work their way through, and that AI is maybe changing that, or is it accelerating that, or is actually the career path quite different now? We're starting to see people outside of tech as well becoming incredibly tech savvy because AI is accelerating what they're able to do. But then we're having to make sure that they're doing that in a really, really safe way. We're having to run different types of education and coaching around prompt engineering and things like that as well. So I think I think we're in the midst of it all changing, in the career path on the way through, because we're using, even in the more junior roles, we're using AI so much more to replace the sort of toil of some of those roles. But then what we're doing is investing in their skills so that they can take a slightly different career path. And I think even when I think about some of the most junior roles in our organization, which tend to be within the Global Operations Center, and I look at how tech savvy they are today versus to how tech savvy they were last year, the difference is black and white. To the point where, a GOC engineer using various AI tools and techniques was able to build a solution that actually meant we could avoid a big OPEX spend on a number of tools that we were going to be using for real-time user monitoring and things like that, because they'd been attending some of these skills workshops and gone, hang on, I've got a problem here in my job and I'm going to build a solution for that. So that now means that when we're actually recruiting for those GOC engineering roles now, we're actually changing the criteria for those roles as they come in. So I don't quite know the answer, Rachel, but I know for what I'm seeing, it's rapidly changing, and we're having to change all of our processes around our recruitment and our career paths and people in current roles and how their roles are pivoting and the skills they need are pivoting to do those roles.
Catherine, I could see you nodding in the background there and smiling oftentimes. What's your response to that?
Well, definitely would build on everything that Joe said. I think we're in a very interesting backdrop right now, because a lot of the when I did various internships, there were a lot of very exciting tasks, but there were some more menial tasks now that you can get done very fast and to a fantastic standard with Copilot, for instance. So there's a lot of tasks that you don't necessarily have to do manually now. I think we really need very original, out of the box thinking right now, because I think if we're the projects that have most impressed me around AI transformation are where we've actually rewired the client's operating model, and actually they've actually rethought how they do things. So we haven't just bolted on a new technology onto a old process. We've actually re-envisioned the process. We've come up with something completely different. As Joe was alluding to what your engineer did, he just rethought how we did things. And I think particularly on a junior level and a senior level, we're going to have much more work around actually rethinking the status quo, rethinking the operating model, and kind of preparing for this new era. And that doesn't mean that there will be less of those tasks, but in their place there'll be much more exciting tasks. And when I think of a generation who's really set to do that, I think we are too. But I'm just going to go back to that reverse mentoring conversation. The way that generation, the way my friends' kids, for instance, interface with this technology is completely different. And I would love to have them in charge of actually creating some of these new processes, because we need that type of thinking, and we need that way of natively engaging with this technology that they have, because they were born in this era, and from day one they were interacting with this technology to actually put that technology to work for them. And I think for is the important word there. It's not doing something with this technology, it's letting this technology do something for you, whether it's for you as an individual or for your business.
Nina, I could see you nodding there to the statement on out-of-the-box thinking. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's an opportunity which I think is very good for the new junior roles to come in and bring that challenge. I'm just always trying kind of to make sure that we understand, Catherine, as you're saying, what process we're optimizing, because they still lack that kind of understanding of the process. So I think that's balance, again, to your paradoxes, to still give them opportunity to learn the basic process, to be able to think out of the box. So I don't see that it's going away, the need to actually understand the basics, to be able to bring that out of the box thinking. So I see it as an opportunity, but also as a threat. Sometimes people just don't realize that the process has to be re-engineered, and it needs the experience with that out-of-the-box thinking combined. So maybe pairing up that out-of-the-box thinker with the person who is sitting in the process for a long time, kind of to do that challenging dialogues happening.
Lovely. And I think Diana Piper's just about to head off, but she's basically said we need to support junior roles. They can't become senior if they don't start as junior. Anything you'd like to build on that?
I think it's along the line of what Nina just said there, about that you still need to know the basics. You need to have that basic foundation and understanding. And the outcomes we need to achieve generally in what we do in our roles is the same. It's just the way we go about them is changing. So the basics are the same. The mechanisms and how we get there have been rapidly changing, particularly over the last couple of years.
I can also just give a quick example. I remember one of my early on in my consulting career, really a junior project I had. We worked with the back office on a particular process in financial services, and we just really worked on the backlog with the back office. And now I'm increasingly having a lot of conversations about that process and how to, re-envision, redesign that process. And to contextualize your point, Nina, I would not have that knowledge of that process if I hadn't worked in it nearly 12 years ago, and actually seen firsthand with the back office, gone through it and seen the pain points, the good points, and how we could do things differently there.
Lovely, thank you all. And obviously, I just want to mention that there are a few people who were keen to attend today but could not make it, and they sent over a few questions in advance. I'm going to read out my favourite one. Can you share an example where empowering younger or emerging talents led to unexpected innovation?
Gosh, every day.
Ooh.
Yeah. Every day I am astounded at we had a guy last week who he worked in a team that when some of our big e-commerce clients have got changes that they want to make to their websites. They'll raise a request and it will go into the team and it will go into the sprint and they will make the change. He's a grad. He's not been with us very long. And he'd been attending the AI podcast, which is called Supercharged Engineering. So he was learning all these new tools and techniques. And he did some analysis of all these tickets that come in. And these little adjustments and that, when you add them all up across all the clients, are very costly. And actually, he's decided he'd like to do something a bit more interesting than making a blue box screen or making a box rounded corners or whatever. So what he actually built over a weekend was something called, so our e-commerce platform's called Altitude. He built a product called Ultilabs. He analysed all of the requests that come through, and he built a tool that could deliver 90% of those changes self-serve directly by the client instantly, all with a sort of interactive drag and drop UI. And that single thing just in one weekend absolutely blew my mind. And this sort of thing is happening all the time. And we go back to people in junior roles and understanding the basics. And Catherine, you talked about that back office process. It's all still the same processes. It's all still the same tasks and the same outcomes. But when these people understand those things and then they apply their way of thinking and their way of approaching solving these problems, that's when the magical stuff's happening. And I'm seeing it happening day in, day out, and it's wonderful.
Nina, Catherine, are you seeing this kind of innovation within your own organisations?
Yes. Nina, do you want to share first, or I can share a couple of examples as well? Otherwise, so at Avanade, we're responsible in everything we do. And when I joined, something I was particularly impressed was that we have mandatory responsible AI trainings, for instance. So you cannot start your work at Avanade. You will be incompliant unless you've taken these responsible AI trainings. And we have a program at Avanade, which is a little bit like an incubator that rolls out innovation to the rest of the company, called Disrupt Avanade. And they came up with a fantastic responsible AI tool called our AI Control Tower, which monitors the risk of the use cases that we're rolling out and actually grades them in terms of low, medium, and high risk. And we've also rolled that out at clients, and that came out of Disrupt Avanade and was the result of that thinking from some of our most talented employees. So that's something that we still implement now.
Lovely. And Nina, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, well, we have in Brambles the whole kind of digital team, which is disrupting and bringing digital solutions. So they're actually really amazing group of people who are targeting all of that and are observing that and bringing it to customers. And it's always inspiring. So I just wish we can instill that, like I'm listening to Joe and Catherine, more wider than beyond digital teams. So I think for the corporate organization, that's probably a next step to allow this to happen a little bit wider beyond just dedicated digital teams. So that's something I think we need as corporates to kind of develop a little bit further, to be a little bit more kind of open and democratize those skill sets.
We used to have a lot of that here. It's kind of like there used to be this separate, a few years ago now, sort of R&D team that got to play with all the new tech. And of course, it's accelerating so quickly. Within all of the products, you need to be innovating like that. Catherine was saying earlier, you can't be doing things in months and years. You've got to be releasing new versions of your products every couple of weeks, really. You need to be showing these new features landing, and you can't wait. And why should they have all the fun? You know, the teams are like, we want to be doing R&D ourselves across all of our products. So yeah, when we had it siloed, the teams are a bit miffed about, we want to be using the goodies on our products.
Lovely. Thank you very much, all. I'm going to leave you then with one final question. What are your top 3 key takeaways from this session, taking everything that's been discussed into account? I'll start with you, Catherine.
I think a blend of generations in the workforce. I think we've talked a lot about inclusive design and having everyone at the table, but particularly around the chat we've just had about processes and re-envisioning how we do things. You need everyone at the table there, and you need that wisdom from people who've seen the progression of those processes and how those processes have evolved. And then you need some of our more AI native colleagues at the table too, who've just grown up with this technology. And then I think, yeah, as you say, you can really produce transformational results, and probably a competitive advantage in what you're doing as well. Are we going for one each, or are we going for three each? I wasn't quite sure.
I'll leave it to you. You can do one or three, whatever suits you most.
I'll go for that one, and then hand it over to Jo and Nina.
Yeah. I'm actually so fascinated with the book Catherine has mentioned. It's the only thing I can think about. I have to say that I'm ADHD. So for me, it's like I got stuck on that one. It's very difficult to think about this. But that was an exciting learning. But I think it's also like to understand like how we all are kind of in the same position, kind of grasping with the ideas, and again reaffirming that you're not alone in this, and kind of that we have to share more, and the amazing people we met here, just to learn from them and bring those experiences back. That was for me the learning.
I think mine is, because this is all about sort of stewards of tomorrow's talent. So I think regardless of what's going on in the industry, we've all talked about inclusivity and psychological safety, which is number one, no matter what we're talking about. But I think one thing I'm really trying to focus on is building, future leaders and teams that thrive on that rapid pace of change and don't feel threatened by it. Because I think any teams or any talent that feel threatened by it won't thrive. As talent, you've got to be able to deal with that constantly. So that's really my focus, and my number one thing is focusing on building that type of culture with all the future team and leadership.
Lovely, thank you very much, all. And just another side note here for those of you asking in the chat. If you'd like to find out more about the TechGirl Festival in Cambridge, we have dropped in the link to sign up just below there. There we go, Nathan just put it in. And we do have obviously some graphics you can use for outreach and posting to your LinkedIn network. So do look out for that. And we have a shiny new poster for the festival as well, which you can ask any member of our team for. But I think I'll wrap it up there. Thank you all so much again for your insights and for joining this TechGirl C-Suite Exchange. A huge thank you to our speakers, and of course, thanks to Avanade for partnering with us on this. And if you found today's topic interesting, or if you want to learn more, again, please contact myself or a member of the Hot Topics team. And for those of you watching live or on demand, I'll be writing an article following the session, so do keep an eye out for that one in the coming weeks. Until next time, take care all.